This past weekend at Monza, McLaren made a big error with swapping the drivers around, and the whole debacle surrounding the decision, or as the cool kids say, they opened a can of worms. It sets a weird standard going forward, and it's going to be interesting to see how things play out if McLaren are forced to make a decision later in the season for a championship decider. But who's the one at fault? I've seen all throughout the internet that people are blaming Lando Norris, the McLaren team, and somehow even Oscar Piastri, but I really want to break it down. To get a gauge of what people were thinking, I went ahead and did what I suggest most people should never do, and I checked F1 social media comments. Instagram, Twitter, and even Reddit, but there seems to be a common theme. People form conclusions without a real explanation. Calling Lando a crybaby, saying he could have declined swapping places, and overall just a bunch of slop, you can see why you shouldn't venture into these areas of the internet. At the end of the day, you can agree with my take or not, but I'm going to be breaking it down to the best of my ability and showing why I think the way that I think. For context, all you need to know is positions 2 through 4. Lando Norris in second, Oscar Piastri in third, and Charles Leclerc in fourth. It's lap 45, and McLaren feels Piastri has the threat of an undercut from Charles Leclerc, who pitted on lap 41. When the gap between them at the time is around 28 seconds, but the issue is that Lando Norris is first on track of the two McLarens, 3 seconds ahead, and therefore he should be the first service. But here's where it all comes crumbling down. So the average time you lose while entering the pits in Monza is 24.3 seconds, meaning that there's a net gap between Piastri and Leclerc of 3.7 seconds, more than the gap to Norris. But the team tells Norris there's no threat from an undercut from Piastri, so they opt to pit Piastri first to preserve that 2-3 finish. Now, this isn't necessarily wrong, as 3 seconds is going to be hard to lose in pitting in a one lap difference, barring a slow pit stop. But the issue is the contradiction of feeling threatened by Leclerc, who's a net 3.7 seconds back, yet Norris has no threat from Piastri 3 seconds back. Regardless, McLaren did end up opting to box Piastri first. Even though it was the wrong decision in the moment, and combining that with the slow pit stop from Norris and Piastri coming out ahead on track, it really just leaves a sticky situation that really has no good way of navigating through. Now, the controversy there is that should Piastri give up the place, or do they just race on from there? And that's the whole subjective part. And it can be taken either way depending on the person, but the biggest thing to look at is how all this could be avoided by just pitting Norris first. The fact of the matter is that even if Leclerc does threaten Piastri, Norris should be boxing first as he's the first on the team in position. He was ahead in the race, so he's entitled to get the first service. This would make things tougher for Piastri, but it avoids the political part within the team, and it really lets it down to racing. This would likely result in Piastri coming out closely ahead or closely behind Leclerc, but that's just how it has to be sometimes. Not that it's the exact same thing, but earlier in the year at Silverstone, Norris pitted behind Piastri as a result of Piastri being ahead on track and lost position due to it. It was a lot different considering it was a double stack in rainy conditions, but you can see what I'm saying where the overall point still stands. That's just how racing is, and sometimes you are going to end up losing out. Now, based on the justification I've given, it's safe to say that I do put the blame on McLaren as a team, not a specific driver. The whole situation was avoidable by not making changes to past precedent, and not to be a nerd or anything, but this reminded me of something. If you're familiar with a philosopher by the name of Russell Kirk, he argued that it was part of human nature that we make change out of boredom, and in doing that, we tend to change things that don't need changing and end up causing more issues. This is exactly what I see with McLaren's doings, as they could have just continued the normal procedure of boxing Norris first, but they try to change things up and suffer the consequences. Even though most people will agree that this is the fault of McLaren, that's just not where it ends, as most of the uproar, though, seems to be aimed at how it was handled after the error is made. Norris ended up getting the spot back from Piastri, and many people believe this was the right move, but a resounding amount of people believe that Piastri deserved the spot as well, and I'm here to tell you, both arguments are valid. When looking at it from Norris's point of view, it makes plenty of sense why he should be inclined to get the spot back. He allowed Oscar to pit before him and inherently gave him the advantage. Also, the slow pit stop was completely out of his control, but that's less of the point here. If it was just a slow pit stop, I would fully agree that Piastri should have gone to keep the spot, but because of Oscar pitting first, there is a bit of an argument for Norris, and I don't think it's crazy to side with Lando in this instance. On the other hand, with Piastri, it's also not wrong to say he deserves the spot. He was generally close to Norris throughout the race, and the team decided to pit him first, not him. They asked Lando, and he approved it, but it was because he was never in the intention to pass Norris, but rather to keep both at limbo, and then they can race to the line from there. The team strategy decision was given to him, and the slow pit stop for Norris had nothing to do with him personally, so it makes sense why he would also deserve the P2. Both sides of the argument are completely valid, and I don't think that there's one definitive answer. But after all, the situation only exists because of McLaren's decision making. There's too much going on at that moment so that they weren't thinking about anything except the immediate future. And because of that, this whole thing brings a scary ideology going forward for the rest of the championship battle. The most disturbing part of this whole ordeal is that it isn't the first time it happened, though. I'm sure many of you remember Budapest last year, where Lando pitted before Oscar to cover off an undercut from Hamilton and ended up passing Piastri, albeit not through a slow pit stop this time. It definitely took more time to get the position handed back, and it caused a lot of drama because of that, but the issue is that a team can allow this sort of thing to happen on multiple occurrences. Make a mistake once, it's excusable, but make it twice, and it isn't. If this same instance happens again later this season, in a moment where the championship is decided, it's going to cause quite a ruckus. If they do end up following the team order strategies, that's going to leave us with a championship decided by team orders. Regardless of which of the two wins and which one loses, I don't think either side would be content with the championship ending in that fashion, and neither would the fans. In the other instance, if they don't use the team orders, you can just say that they didn't follow the same principle that they did in the past. By picking and choosing when to bring in these team orders and doing what they think is fair, it would be unfair to the driver that loses out because McLaren showed they were willing to do this sort of thing, and if they don't, the question would be why did they not do it again when it truly mattered the most? This puts them in a very tough situation because if the scenario arises at all, they're forced to make a move that will hurt both them and the relationship with both of their drivers, no matter the decision that they end up making. The championship gap has grown since Norris's DNF at Zandvoort, but the fight is still very much on, and I'd hate to see it be tainted by team orders. Many people are already calling this year's championship a Mickey Mouse year, and although I would disagree so far, if it keeps following in the trajectory it's going, that just might be the case sooner than we think it will be.